Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by my input delayed co-host Tucker Hazel, and we are here today to review the opening salvo of Nintendo 64 Online. It's constantly expanding, so I think we'll probably do a second review at some point in the future. But these are some initial thoughts after playing with this launch lineup. But before we give our thoughts, if you want to tell us what you think of N64 Online or anything else at all, be sure to join our Discord. It's been popping recently,
It
really
has.
popping. If you want to play Pikmin Bloom, especially, you should join our Discord.
Hmm.
But if you don't want to do that, you can make it up to me by liking
Hmm.
the video, subscribing to the channel, and ringing the
Yeah.
bell.
Hmm.
But Tucker, we did the plugs. It's time to talk about Nintendo 64 Online. Hit me
Yeah.
with your high level impressions.
High level impressions come down mostly from the fact that this game is this collection is just being torn asunder online. And it's very hard to like nail down what the truth of the reality of this service is.
Yes.
Though obviously we're spending here talking about our own perspective on it.
Yeah.
I am pretty underwhelmed from a lot of regards. And as the time has gone on, I have sort of realized that I don't think that this is worth that more than double price increase. Not necessarily because I don't think it has promise, but because what they have here at launch does not show polish, does not show care, and is pretty poor in a lot of areas.
Yeah. Everybody's lying to you about Nintendo 64 Online.
That's just Sato's video, actually. That's a
That's actually a great title. And I mean that in every direction. People are telling you that this collection is horse shit and they're
yeah.
wrong. People are telling you that this is fantastic and they're wrong.
Mhm.
It's fine. I think the N6, I'm not really going to comment on like the value of N6 of the NSO expansion pack on the whole
Okay.
because I haven't even downloaded the Genesis collection yet.
Mhm.
We haven't played Happy Paradise Designer. I forget what
Happy
it's called.
Paradise, Happy Home Paradise. Yeah.
Happy Home Paradise. But just in the context of N64 Online itself,
Mhm.
I love this library. This is one of my favorite Nintendo libraries. And I just think that what's frustrating is that they do it justice in so many ways,
Mhm.
but there are also just blatant shortcomings and oversights that hold it back.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to hear you say, and of course, I know your love for the N64 library. It's not
Yeah.
something you talk a lot about, but I mean, that's because the opportunity doesn't arise very often. These
Right.
games are, for the most part, only if the greatest are talked about consistently, and a lot of them have been pushed to the wayside. And this is a good chance for it to be reevaluated.
Yeah.
I like the N64's library a lot. I would love to get into it. I do not love this library. The nine
Yeah.
game selection that they chose is one of the weakest aspects of this. And I think one of the reasons that I'm already feeling after less than a week with this service that it's just going to be a waiting game for me to get to
Yeah.
stuff that seems really interesting.
So what's weird to me about that is I agree with you, but I'm not sure we are correct
Okay.
necessarily
Sure.
because I think that from the outside looking in, these nine games offer a lot of gameplay hours and they
Sure.
represent what is not in its entirety, but a majority of the S tier games on the system.
Sure.
I think that just Mario Ocarina and Mario Kart or Sub and
Mhm.
Mario Kart for Star Fox, depending on your preferences, that's as I would do.
On your sub in Mario Kart for Star Fox based on your IQ. I don't know.
I think that right there, that is offering you honestly perhaps way more at launch than NES or SNES did, because ultimately those
Sure.
games are so much more accessible, and
Mhm.
any individual one of those games does not give you nearly as much gameplay hours as Ocarina of Time does.
True. Yes.
And so I'm not necessarily frustrated by the nine games that are here. What I'm
Mhm.
frustrated by is that we don't know when the next six are coming, and we
Yes.
don't know when it's 38 game slots have been data mined
Mhm.
for N64 Online.
I was doing the fucking math. I had Google Sheets open. I was looking at
Yeah,
my Nintendo history document for all the games that felt like they would make sense for a lot of these slots. And of course, they're also on that league. They're alphabetized and there are spaces so you can tell sort of what's where. And
yeah,
some of the stuff that has been data mined outside of the extra games that we already know are coming are very exciting. But
yes,
it does lead to a question mark around this nine game setup with a couple of exceptions being kind of weird.
yeah,
Why wasn't it larger? Why didn't
right,
they
right, right.
have more effort put into the ones that are there? Because the biggest problem, not with necessarily the value of or the gameplay hours with the nine games that are there, is that on a lot of levels for each of these games, there are issues with the package that seem like they're ignoring the polish that we want out of this. If it was 18, 20 games from the N64 library and we got a whole across the board salvo of exactly what we wanted that would cover the library, and we're just waiting for the couple weird ones to fill in, and it was felt like they were missing a couple things from polish value, okay, but at least we got a huge selection. But the fact is that we got a small selection, a solid selection, but a small one, and we're still lacking those polish value.
Yeah, I think, and I want to talk about the polish, the bells and whistles, the emulation, the control, everything. But just to my final point about the library itself is that I don't mind the small library. It's that what I mind is that we don't know when the library is getting bigger.
Sure,
that's the thing, because ultimately, I think that that SNES Online would have been more successful had that library been cut in half, and every week or every 2 weeks it was filled in.
Yes, no, that's certainly true.
Because if this is because either this is a service or it's a bundle of content, right?
That's a good point.
And I personally, I've got no problem with the service model. Engage me in your ecosystem. I don't need all of these games at once.
True.
And so if you were saying, here's the roadmap, you're getting these 9 games, next week, here's Paper Mario. In 2 weeks, Banjo-Kazooie and Majora's Mask. Then F-Zero X, which is the one I really want, when as sad as not here right away. This when you're getting that. If then we had a roadmap similar to what Game Pass does or whatever, and of course those are not commensurate services, but the general principle of let's tell you when stuff is coming, that would make me a lot more comfortable with where it is now. It's not the number of games, it's the lack of information about the other ones.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. I mean, I'm just thinking of the reality where every 2 weeks we get 1 or 2 games dropped on all these services. It's like, hey, it's 2 weeks later. A weird NES game, a couple of strange SNES games, and an N64 game. Have fun with these for the week. These games are finally back in the hands of modern players. People will give them a chance. Have that be the conversation for that period of time. But when you drop fucking Fire and Ice Bros and Claymates, like a year and a half after the SNES Online drops, and unfortunately, that's the only track record we have to place N64 Online in. Like, we're probably not getting Smash Bros and Mario Party, which were a part of the data mine or whatever, for 2 years from now, which is really worrisome.
Yeah, and this is why it's weird. This is why I personally just leave it here, because maybe they'll change, maybe they won't. This again feeds into the fact that people have a narrative either for or against the service, and what I have is the service, and ultimately I don't know if they're going to improve. We've got no reason to expect that, but the fact that these games are data mined, there was no similar data mine like this for the other services.
No, that's true.
And so that for me puts it up in the air as to whether or not it's going to be better. But just before we get off this point, Tucker, we bared our midriff for Kirby 3D platformer. I would bear my entire ass crack if we got a service in which every 2 weeks we had new and interesting retro Nintendo titles to play. Can you imagine that?
Holy shit.
Imagine that. Let's talk about.
I'll write that down somewhere, and if it fucking comes to fruition in 25 years, I'll make you hold. I'll hold you to that. I'll hold your ass to the fire.
If you do the same thing, I will.
I didn't say that though. Why would I do that?
Because you bared your midriff for Kirby too.
Yeah, but I'm not as excited about this.
We'll get into the legal details.
This will be an off camera. Yeah.
But I want to talk for a second about.
Set aside 3 hours tonight, please.
Now the structure of NSO itself. We can talk about the games. I don't know how important, frankly, that is, because we covered a lot of it on BLB already. But talking about the service apparatus itself.
Yeah, that's what this video is for.
This is where I get frustrated, because it's really good until it isn't. The first thing is that the games are beautiful. This is the best N64 games have ever looked. These games are presented in the highest resolution they've ever been in before, and in the brightest color palette they've ever been presented in before. Wii U games, you're playing through like a fucking piece of that like brown parchment paper that my mom would use to cook shit on. Like they are unnecessarily dark, but here there's a vibrance and a clarity to everything that makes these games so much cleaner, and I think so much more enjoyable today. Like when you in Star Fox, when you get to Venom, if you shoot the ground in Venom,
I'm never gonna get there.
You leave like burn marks in the ground, which I have just never seen before.
And is that just due to the low resolution of the cartridge game or what?
It's a
Presumably they're in the game. They didn't
no,
add them.
no, then they're not added, but it's a pro and a con, right? Because the fog that hid draw distances is gone in this, which is a huge point of contention for some people.
Yeah.
But the emulation is way brighter and the textures are way sharper. So it just lets me visually pick out details that I completely overlooked before.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with the visuals of these games. I do think that there are instances in this where it's showing it in super high quality with no retroactive effort to clean things up, like in Mario 64, which I had not played myself, but I've seen side-by-side comparisons of the one that was barely put work into, but the 3D All-Stars collection, where they did change the fonts and they changed some things to make it so there wasn't pixelated edges on the text and on things in the environment. Those things are jaggy, but it makes sense that this is just the emulator these games are running on, which is I don't have a huge issue with. But for the whole, on the whole, these games do look the best that they ever have.
I hate that we have to praise 3D All Stars for doing anything, but
Guys, they put 3% effort into it.
I would actually say personally, I want those rough edges because as you were talking about in BLB, which is a really great point, you can play the 50 hertz PAL versions of these. The fact that Nintendo is preserving and cleaning these games up as they are, I think is really valuable. You know, like you see this, it's apples and oranges, but Rockstar saying, okay, we're giving you the GTA trilogy, but we're going to take away the PS2 classics of these games from PlayStation Network.
That's such a weird decision. Yeah.
For me, I think there's something really nice about from a preservationist standpoint that Nintendo is saying, here are these games, here they are in their cleanest version, and that's where we're going to leave it.
Yeah, sure.
For me, that doesn't really speak to a lack of effort, and there is a lack of effort in other areas I want to talk about, but just a difference of intent. So that didn't really bother me personally.
No, that's definitely true. I think I was mostly just considering it from the fact that these games are the best that they've looked. That does reveal issues.
Yes,
I mean, or things with the original games, but that's a testament to the Switch being better hardware.
Believe it or not,
25 years later, as opposed to anything particularly wrong with these games themselves.
Yeah.
But the problems come in not with the games themselves, I would say on the whole, but with the framework that are being put in and the fact that there is not with those cleanup things, but with the preservation of the emulation having issues with each specific game, and that causing a lot of complaints that I think are very clear.
Yes, the biggest one, the most absurd oversight here is that N64 Online does not emulate the controller pack, which is a ridiculous oversight, because what that means is that games that saved data to the controller pack cannot save that data. And from what I understand, WinBack saves all of its data to the controller pack.
So you have to use save states in order to.
I suppose so. Yeah, but what in my personal experience, the one that really bothered me is that time trial ghost data in Mario Kart 64 is saved to the controller pack. What
happens if you try?
It just says there is no control. You get a prompt on the screen.
Yeah,
that says, Ghost save data is not available. There is no controller pack inserted into controller one.
And you're like looking at the back of your Joy-Con, where do I put it in?
Yeah, and that is just so crazy to me, how they didn't account for that and emulate on a software level the controller pack being there, because then fundamental elements of these games are just unavailable.
Yeah. And I don't know how any of that works, or if that would require some sort of extra external thing that you would say, like, check, okay, add a controller pack to this or whatever, but they can do it. It's not impossible to do, especially the hardware that's running on, the technology that they have today. Of course, having that original source data of these games that they made, they could make that work. And it is a glaring oversight that does make me question the effort that went into this package.
Yeah, and like I'm no developer. I took an intro to Python coding class and passed it by the skin of my fucking teeth. So I don't want to say that it's easy, but what I can say is on Xbox, they simulate an Xbox 360 hard drive to save your games to. You can simulate a GameCube memory card, right? Yeah. You can simulate memory cards. Nintendo has the resources and the technical ability to address an issue like this, and they just didn't.
Believe it or not. It's not that it can't be done. No, well,
it wasn't done.
It wasn't done, and it should be done.
The other big one for me, Tucker, is the lack of rebindable controls.
That's the biggest one for me. And that's the biggest one for me.
There are people who are saying who cares because you can rebind any controller in the in the system settings.
Mhm.
That is simply not good enough for me.
No, of course it's not, because I mean, people say that is a solution, which is true, and but
It is
you have
a
to go
solution.
you have to
Yes.
go through multiple layers to get to that. But also, and I don't think I've ever rebound system-wide controls
I haven't
before,
either.
but you're rebinding system-wide controls. If you
Right.
wanted to play 40 minutes of Star Fox 64 and then switch over to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you got to go back and rebind the controls to actual controls for the game to play a game with normal controls again. You're reformatting your entire system to do something that should be within the app itself.
Yeah, I will. I'll just if before anyone cops down your throat.
Oh,
Well, what I understand is you can make controller presets in there,
oh, okay.
which is still for me not a good solution
Mhm.
because I shouldn't have to on a hardware level rebind my controls when the Wii U Virtual Console lets you remap
Yeah,
controls in the
very easily.
context of the applications themselves.
Mhm.
It's
Within the
just
context of each game.
in the context of each game, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing to see this not here, especially because Nintendo takes some weird liberties with what is put on alternate buttons. Because
They have unique control schemes for every
yeah,
game, I believe.
little history lesson for the children out there. These buttons were not here before.
Mhm.
And so when you play like Star Fox, boost and break are bound to these. But that's an arbitrary decision Nintendo made.
Yeah.
Why can't I decide what's bound to the extra buttons, right? Even if you want to look, this would still not be great, but if you were like, look, A and B are what A and B did,
Mhm.
sticks, the C buttons are emulated on the right stick, but you have free reign over what you want to put on X, Y, and then the other set of the other bumper and trigger.
Mhm.
That's something, but totally rebindable controls just should have been here.
Yeah, I mean, because we know that's possible.
Yeah,
It's a strange oversight that I foresee that being added. I think that's a big enough thing where they don't let that go forever.
hopefully.
But the fact that it's not here at launch and does make games like Star Fox 64 that have more complicated control schemes hard to play, hard to get your head around.
Yeah,
Fucking
and
Nintendo.
the other one that I'm curious what your thoughts on is the lack of rewind, because
Yes.
for me, rewind is useful in games that are designed like garbage
Mhm.
most of the time,
Yes.
right? I needed a rewind for Ninja Gaiden because I had no fucking idea when some samurai was going to jump out of a hole that I had already killed an enemy from, right?
Mhm.
In the games that are much better designed, I think rewind isn't as necessary. And frankly, I think that the active rewinding can take away from an experience.
Mhm.
I think, but at the same time, the option should be there. And that's where I come down on it is that personally, I don't think these games need it. I think save
Mhm.
states is perfectly fine for N64 games. But at the same time, it was such a nice quality of life accessibility feature that
Yeah.
removing it doesn't seem to make sense to me.
No, it's definitely an interesting thing considering this is still the same framework that NES and SNES Online, I mean, were built on.
Yeah.
The menus look the exact same. The layout of everything, every way you're interacting with this is the exact same, but
Yeah.
they don't have that option on these. I mean, I don't necessarily know how it really would feel playing a 3D game with rewind, or
Yeah.
how complicated that would be to change. But considering that they have that framework built, it's strange that there's not an option. Retrospectively, or trying to remember back, didn't one of them not have that at launch? Or am I wrong?
It might have been added backwards into NES,
Yeah,
perhaps.
I think it was something like that. Because I remember
Well,
them revealing SNES Online and saying, hey, look, these games have that. But I think it might have not been
it might
available at
have.
the launch of NES Online. That was fucking 10 years ago. Who knows?
They're also, yeah, we're actually 10 years old when the service was initially revealed. But I will
They
say
still
that
haven't added Earthbound.
it might there might just again fucking technological dumbass here,
Mhm.
but it might just not be feasible to have rewind in a 3D space. Like
Mhm.
rewind might work as simply as just moving the sprites backwards on the screen, but
Yeah,
like how do you reverse AI pathfinding in a 3D space, right? That just might not
sure.
be possible. I don't know if rewind works by always keeping in RAM the last like 45 seconds of gameplay or by literally just moving the game backwards. You know what I mean?
I think
I
it's
don't know.
probably the earlier one, considering you have that option of where you want to go, and like
Yeah.
they have like the last 60 seconds or whatever of gameplay that you can pan through to
Yeah.
select exactly where you want to go. But regardless, I believe it's
There
possible.
should right. There should be that this for me is one that might be is a big question mark of this genuinely just might not be feasible. We
Yeah,
don't see many collections of this era release, so it's
true.
not like we really
Yes.
have a template because
Yeah.
like Rewind, I really found out about it through like the things that Konami and Capcom were doing, opposed to in their collections, opposed to what Nintendo was doing with that with NSO. So that's a question mark for me.
Yeah.
That for me is not nearly as big of an issue as the lack of controller pack emulation or
Rebindable controls. Yeah.
rebindable controls, but it's still something to point out. Do you have any other major issues you want to address? Because then there's the elephant in the room.
No, I think we just go jump straight to the Pack E Derm in the room. It's a character in Yoshi's Story. I was playing Yoshi's Story this morning.
Tucker, the online multiplayer is awesome. This is why this is the thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the service is critically disappointing because the online multiplayer does to these games what it never did to NES and SNES games.
True. Yes.
I really genuinely feel like this is an absolute revelation for these games.
I think that that's the most important thing that any of these services has done. Even looking back to something like NES Online, maybe we didn't use it as much, but the fact that you don't have to get out an NES cartridge, 2 controllers, and get your fucking friend to your house to play whatever online or in person is amazing. I mean, I would never play almost any games multiplayer if they're not available online because I don't have a lot of friends in person that are willing to do these sort of things with. And hearing all these stories from the old hats about how great the multiplayer era of N64 was and plugging in 4 controllers and sit in the fucking basement with your goddamn Mountain Dews or whatever. I was never going to experience any of those games that way until they were added here. And I do think that that is looking forward what I'm most interested in each of these games being allowed in this framework. You can deal with the you can deal with the unrebindable controls. You can deal with a few problems with emulation. It doesn't make the games unplayable, but the games are actually more playable than they've ever been to a modern audience because you can play them online. And I'm very excited for that.
Me too. I think it's fantastic. The reputation of the NES and SNES was not the party machine. That's what the N64 was.
True.
And that simply got lost. It was not feasible to recreate that experience beyond original hardware. Even on like a Wii U, right? You still had to have all your friends together and you needed particular controllers, you know. On Wii, you couldn't even play N64 virtual console games on Wii unless you had an external controller. Like the Wii remote couldn't even do it, you know?
Or like the classic controller or whatever.
You could use the classic controller, sure, but the point is if you wanted to play those, you had to just buy a completely new specific controller for it. There were always these barriers that this completely tears down. And what's cool about it is it's not like they made some kind of simulated experience where like, oh, join into a lobby for Mario Kart 64, you're off to the races. It's your friend is just there with you. It basically is a simulation of the local multiplayer experience. You can just watch me play Star Fox for a little while. You know, and going through the menus, opening up split screen. It's a different type of online. It's a local online, which I think really brings back the spirit of these games and makes them feel fresh again. Playing Mario Kart 64 online with you in split screen, bizarre that we were able to do that, but that was so much fun. And I reviewed the service Retroware and I said that like hour and a half of N64 we played together justified the price for me entirely.
No, yeah, I'm confused a little bit about the heavy criticisms that are being levied at the online play for these games because I did have hitches when we were playing. I had Mario Kart 64, whoop, frame rate, whoa, and then it would come back. I was never kicked out once, and I know that has happened to people, but everything that I had with this is about as good as I could want it. I do think that obviously they can do better. The online multiplayer for Switch games has been increasing in quality since the launch of the system, and we can only hope that they'll retroactively apply it to things like this so they do run smoother and people are not having to deal with weird connections from one person affecting the play of everyone else. But maybe that's just the way that they designed it around on local online has to do with the fact that the connections are it's a lot of weird question marks, but it's so close to good that I don't have an issue with it personally.
This one I could have an answer for on a technical level. The net code here is delay based. And so what that means is that it is completely predicated on the connections of everybody in the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
If one person's Wi-Fi chugs, the other person's game stops to accommodate. That's delay-based matchmaking netcode. The alternative is a rollback netcode, which is what a lot of fighting games use, and Smash Ultimate does not, and which is a point of contention. Essentially, what rollback netcode does is that it predicts what the next 2-3 input frames would be. So if you start to go around a curve on Luigi's circuit and your Wi-Fi starts to shit a little bit, the other person's Switch is going to understand that your next 2 or 3 frames of input are going to continue you around that curve.
Sure.
So it's not predicated on the other system stopping and waiting for you to be stable again. It's algorithmically understanding what you're doing and continuing that action so that the gameplay isn't interrupted.
That's so ridiculously complicated that my brain is melting you just describing it. But
yeah,
fighting game companies make it work. You can make it work for fucking Mario Tennis on N64.
Yeah. It's from what I understand, far more complicated and intensive to implement. But we're talking about Nintendo, you know. Nickelodeon All Stars, dumb fuck, has rollback netcode.
Yeah,
that's what I'd say there.
And that's probably where all their fucking money went for that game.
Yes, it did not go to the presentation or the content. But our experience was very smooth. Again, it's predicated entirely on what your connection is going to be by merit of the type of connection that is being created.
Yeah.
But if you got good Wi-Fi, it's great. And it really is, for me, why on the whole, I am happy with the service.
Yeah, no, I'm satisfied with it. I would say, especially obviously, and we talked about this in our other NSO video, is we're paying for the family plan. And I know that's not necessarily an option for everyone, but the amount of fucking bullshit layers that people put on top of this, like, it's so hard to do. It's like, okay, calm down. You can get one other person to split it with you and you're paying half the price. The amount of money that you're saving by using the fucking family plan is worth 10 minutes a year of having to deal with communication with other people. I think people are taking that way too seriously. And it's always a little bit obnoxious to me when people are like, no, that's just impossible for me to do it. Man,
I mean,
I can think about it.
Like, I personally, I wouldn't really want to jump on to just offend. Well, I'm on a family plan with you and then people I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's fine with me. But if I was just like, hey, Twitter friends, who wants to get on a plan with me? I'm not sure if I'd really want to do that, frankly, but that is case by case, as is the value of the service overall. I think what's frustrating to me on the grandest level is that now I feel like the argument over value is entirely in the hands of the consumer. I don't think that I can look at this service and say objectively it is so good that it is worth X number of dollars. It is worth what you think it is worth now more than ever, because you have to look at what the service does right and all these things it does wrong, and where does that leave you. All I can do is say, for me personally, I love these games, and having them on Switch inherently is really cool. Star Fox 64 and handheld, of course I got Star Fox 64 3D, but having that in handheld,
I digress.
Sin and Punishment, when I start to get Paper Mario and F-Zero X, and we get Wave Race 64 and weird shit like that we can try. I think it's, for me, it's going to even further justify the cost of entry. But right now I have to say I am not disappointed, and I personally would have spent the money on my own plan to upgrade if I had to.
I think it's interesting to look at this from a hopefully future-proof perspective. We're on the ground floor right now, and people are, I think, rightfully disappointed and upset by the problems this system and service has, especially when comparing it to what everyone else in the industry is doing. This is a flawed deal. It is a content light deal in comparison. All of those things are very justifiable. And I would say when you put it through most of those lenses, this is not worth that money. However, it is presumably only going to get better. You're only going to get more games. You're only going to get the service expanding in content and hopefully quality of life things, like adding reboundable controls, like improving the online, whatever. This will continue in the future. If you're paying for it right now, to be a better deal for you as it goes. Getting on the ground floor is frankly not very important. And I think a lot of people are just going to wait until there are double the amount of games when they added rebindable controls, whatever. It's only gonna get better from here, and that's I think still a glimmer of hope in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't played Sin and Punishment yet, you can wait a little bit longer. There is no pressing need to hop in. I think you're totally right about that. But I think we should, as backlog banter journalists on the ground, being in on that ground floor, I think we should track the growth of the service.
Sure.
And I think that it launched on the 25th of this month. I think that on the 25th of next month, we should make a video seeing how it expanded. And if it didn't expand, we'll put a 40-second video up that said, hey, Tucker, what's new on NSO? And then you say nothing, and then I do the outro.
Yeah.
I think you'll be curious to watch how it unfolds, but it's my 2 cents.
That's my 3 cents.
Damn it. It's more sense than I gave.
Foiled.
But Tucker, I'm about done here. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Me playing Yoshi's Story and watching The Departed. Name a
It's
better
like it's like wine and cheese. They're meant to go together.
Yeah.